politicians aren't going to save us. It's the people on the ground, and so those lessons kept reinforcing themselves. Like, no, it comes from the ground up, not from the top down.
The North Star that people are following is like one man's ideology and vision for the country and even for the world. That is so dangerous, where our court systems and our Congress have literally ceded power to someone who, I'm going to say, is a convicted criminal. And that we believe that that person has the moral authority to lead what we call the most powerful nation on earth.
I can impact change in my locality. I don't need to go and look for a political office.
Yeah, we take the idea of these institutions we have for granted, as if, God created the heavens and the earth, and the following day there were countries and they had institutions and governments. Well, they're all man-made, and because they're man-made, they can be destroyed just as easily.
Welcome back to Politically Connected. I'm saying welcome back because by now I'm sure you're already a subscriber. So welcome to Politically Connected podcast, where here we unpack the complexities of people, policy, and power. I'm your host, Diana Ngao,
aka Madam Speaker, and I am Chaka,
aka the Bishop. Today's episode, we are going across borders. Not just across borders, also to another continent. We have very special guests here, all the way from the United States of America. We have two special gentlemen here who are going to share a lot of insight about their experiences in politics, in governance, and how we can borrow. Maybe they'll also learn a bit from us, maybe?
Yes,
yeah?
always.
Yeah, so we're going to...
George Jackson
Yeah.
on the other end, both brothers from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia.
And sisterly affection.
Okay. And Mr. Dwayne Wharton.
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us here on Politically Connected. It is a great privilege and an honor to have you here. Those who are subscribed by now, I'm sure most of you have seen the previous episode, which was hosted by Madam Speaker, and we had Mr. Zion and Madam Mara Chineme, and they talked about Art of Dialogue, which is what brought all of us together. Politically Connected were guests on Art of Dialogue, and we had such an amazing time. Actually, our panel was hosted by the illustrious Mr. Dwayne, and we had a great time there. We learned a lot of things, and so we're having an exchange program here today. And so
not funded. A not funded exchange program.
So we realized that there's actually a lot that we can learn from each other.
Yeah.
Both of these gentlemen have had a wealth of experience, rich histories, which we're looking forward to hearing about. We'll ask them to introduce themselves so that they can share a little bit about what they do, and then we can go into unpacking their political leanings, their insights, their interests, their vision for the future of Africa-America relations, their vision for their respective countries, their vision for the kind of world we desire going forward, and all of it being politically connected. Maybe we can start with Mr. George Jackson.
That was a great segue. Thank you. So, first of all, thank you for having me, and thank the whole city of Nairobi. Really, I've had an incredible time here.
Oh, nice.
So it's my first trip to Africa, so I'm like super excited about being here. So the work that I do right now, just kind of jumping into it, is I'm the communications director for the Philadelphia Federation. Geez, I was. Let me come today. I'll go back in a second. For the Defender Association of Philadelphia. And what we are is the public defender for the city of Philadelphia. we represent about 75% of the people who are arrested for crimes in Philadelphia, providing them free legal counsel, and actually quite good legal counsel, despite what the kind of perception is of public defenders as being a little bit, inept, and incompetent. We actually have amazing attorneys, and we do a really good job of legal representation, all for free. But also we provide social service support and connection for our young clients and adult clients to the kind of support services they need to help them, once they are able to get out of the justice system, not come back in it. So that's a big part of our mission, is not just the legal defense, but how do we keep particularly our young people out of the system, and adults as well. And I also kind of manage, and by manage I mean I approve his leave, the activities of a community outreach and youth director who does an amazing job with a variety of programs, including our Junior Defender program, which we can talk about. And and also of course, all of the social media team and things of that nature. So that's, in a nutshell, what I do, and I'd love to unpack it.
Yeah, I hope in a sense you can see where we're going with this episode, and that is to see how we can create an impact outside of traditional political spaces, and that is going to be the theme for our episode today. Political alternatives to political office.
We may not all be politicians, but we're all still part of the solution. Yeah.
Mr. Dwayne.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shaka, Diana, for having us. This isn't my first time on the continent. I'm actually a returning Peace Corps volunteer. So my first time was late 90s, early 2000s, serving in Mozambique. And I'm very much connected to a number of people throughout the continent through my work as a host via the Mandela Washington Fellowship Program. So I've been able to visit a number of countries, but I'm going to say that my experience here in Nairobi has been amazing.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Really, I've had such gracious hosts and met so many incredible people. And to be honest, we were saying yesterday that it felt really home. Like it felt like home. It felt so familiar. And I've been taking a ton of videos because I'm sending it back to our friends because we want them to come back with us in the future. So kudos to you all for sure. I'm the principal and founder of a mission-driven consulting firm called Just Strategies. We work with a number of foundations and nonprofit organizations, specifically a lot of public health and community development organizations, and also with a lot of community groups, just really trying to help them achieve their vision. So a lot of strategic planning, a lot of assessment work, a lot of just really trying to elevate their voice. And I'm thrilled that I've been able to come here for the last couple of days and really help to elevate the voice of young activists here in Nairobi. George didn't talk much about his background, but we go way back. So we met, we went to different universities, but we're part of the same fraternity.
Okay.
That's Kappa Alpha Psi. Post-graduation, we reconnected and became really fast friends. We were in each other's weddings.
Oh, nice.
So that's a point right there. Our children, at some point went to school together, and we've maintained just a really close relationship. So I'm thrilled to be able to have this experience alongside with George. And again, we have so many connection points. We DJ together. If you didn't know that.
Wow.
What?
Yeah, jigga. So that's a whole other hat. So, we also...
Is that why you guys were looking for reggae or
always,
different sports?
always.
Taste in
Yeah,
music.
never going to shy away from a good time.
Yeah,
Oh,
if it's
nice.
jazz, we're good. If it's reggae, we're good. If it's
I will say, though...
We did about 3 of those genres.
Or 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got it in.
We got it in officially. But we also worked together. We worked in support of people experiencing homelessness in Philadelphia. I was working as an adult education instructor. You were working on a community development side.
Yep. Housing development and rental housing development and home ownership counseling. preparing people for home ownership.
And I also, transitioned and again, was a Peace Corps volunteer, but also worked for a national mentoring organization, for the American Red Cross around disaster relief, and also in support of people who are experiencing food insecurity. So helping to advance policies in communities that are going to bring healthy foods. And in America, there are plenty of places that we call food deserts or food swamps, meaning the lack of access or the over proliferation of like unhealthy food. And that's where I got into the policy space. And I'm really super excited to be having this conversation with you all today.
And I think what we're hearing already is that there are very many avenues, opportunities, possibilities to have an impact.
Yes.
And to advance society and advance humanity and impact people positively. And that's what I'm hearing from both of you. But before we get into the deep end of that, maybe I'll invite Madam Speaker to bombard you with a question we ask all of our guests when they come onto the podcast.
Yes. So because our podcast is politically connected, we want to know when was the first time, when is your earliest memory of your political consciousness? When you just understood like, oh my gosh, okay, this is politics. When was that? You can tell us about the moment, you can tell us what was happening around you. Give us some context so that we can relive that moment. How old were you?
Was it at home on TV? Was it in school? Was it what was happening? Yeah.
Well, for me, I'm going to say it was probably PEC. I'm going to say People's Emergency Center, where Dwayne and I worked together for a number of years, because a lot of what I did as in the project management space was around tax credits, state tax credits for housing developments and things like that. So it put me into contact with not direct contact, but with political offices in the state, and seeing how, having favor with certain political offices was a pathway to getting the resources you needed to do the projects you wanted in your community. It was one pathway, right? And so that kind of was an awakening. And that's probably when I really started paying attention to the kind of behind the scenes stuff. But I think where I really cut my teeth on it and really became more of a political, quote unquote, animal, if you will, was working at the American Federation of Teachers in Washington, D.C., which is the National Teachers Union. That's where, because unions are big P or capital P and lowercase p political organizations. They're political internally, and they definitely play in the political pool. And that's really where I started, developing a passion for the issues, and how it connects to the politics and how politics connects to our communities. So I think it really started there. Even though I had a perspective, but I didn't, it's where it gave me the tools and some of the knowledge I needed.
For Dwayne, was it also from work you were doing, or was it earlier? Was it?
Yeah. I feel like for me, it was probably in college. There was a really infamous attack on a black man in Los Angeles by the name of Rodney King. And it was filmed, and it was supposed to be one of those moments, a hallmark moment, where we finally again elevated the issue of police brutality, and that we are going to begin to address this issue and make change. And the police officers who were on trial were all acquitted after being videotaped of brutally beating this man. And then we, at my university, I helped to organize just a rally around it. Didn't really think of it as a rally, just that I was feeling so much pain, and I knew a lot of people in my circle were as well. And we kind of organized a candle light vigil, which was kind of a peaceful protest around this issue. I'm going to say, but in terms of moving policies forward, it was my work around food justice where I saw that, I was a teacher and working directly with people, and that was amazing. And as I got older and more education, I became a manager and a leader within the organizations I was working in. But it wasn't until I started thinking about these larger social issues and how so many were interconnected by one, racial inequity, and like who were the people who were always most impacted by these disparities and inequities, how there was a historical context for all of these issues, that they were not something that was at fault for individuals' behaviors or character flaws. A lot of that was influenced by social factors in terms of their health, but there were policy solutions. And I began trying to translate what those issues were into policy opportunities. And that was later on in my life. And I was like, if I would have only discovered this earlier, like what impact I could have made. And largely a lot of the work that we are moving towards in Just Strategies is really, again, to elevate people so that they can understand that their issues are unique to them, but there are probably a lot of other people who are also experiencing the same kinds of harms, and that there are a lot of other people who would be in support of these efforts, as well as those who are kind of getting in the way of progress. But how do we help them create strategies to translate their issues into policies that actually address those issues?
It's one thing to identify a problem.
Yep.
And it's another thing to propose or design a solution.
Yeah.
And it's another thing to make a deliberate effort to be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that in sharing both your experiences, at no point in time have we heard you talking about running for political office in order to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that even especially with you, George, when you were talking about your coming to political consciousness and awareness, dealing with tax credits and seeing what was happening behind the scenes, seeing that carrying political favor would get you the resources to make certain changes or to advance certain opportunities, you didn't feel then that getting into political office would help you advance that favor, carry that favor, or engage with those politicians. So what is it that inspired both your choices to engage in designing solutions in a different way without having to go into the muddiness of politics?
Run for office.
Yeah.
So for me, again, I guess I would have to go back to my time at the American Federation of Teachers. And one of the things that I did in their communications department, where it's a federation, hence the name, but the AFT represents locals in many of the large urban areas in the United States. So New York City, Chicago, Newark, New Jersey, Philadelphia, all of those places. And what I would do is go into these local offices, particularly the ones that maybe didn't have a communications capacity or didn't have a full-time communications director. That was part of my role, was to help them with their planning. And so a lot of times that involved working with our regional organizers in these communities, the people we had on the ground there. And we did a lot of political mobilization that dealt with rallying students, parents, and educators together in order to fight for things, whether it's a fair contract, whether it's to stop or pass legislation around education funding or charter schools or education privatization, any number of issues. And that's where I saw that, the real power and the real change comes from these kinds of efforts and mobilizations. Yes, you have to know who's in office. Yes, you do need relationships with folks because you need to have a dialogue even with folks that you don't agree with. But at the end of the day, politicians aren't going to save us. It's the people on the ground. And so I worked with the AFT for 7 years and then another 7 years with the Philadelphia Federation of Teachers, and those lessons kept reinforcing themselves. Like, no, it comes from the ground up, not from the top down.
No, I like that because, when I'm hearing both of you speaking, especially when you're talking about your political consciousness, what was going through my mind is that, Chaka, a lot of the guests we've had here, the Kenyan guests, political consciousness starts around an election period for most of us. It seems like our realities really shift. every election period. And what I'm seeing from the difference with both of them is that it really comes a bit later, because not every election period is earth-shattering, and that also gives the stability to realize that I can impact change in my locality. I don't need to go and look for a political office.
Yeah, or in my sector.
Yeah.
And actually, that brings to a very interesting point, because, sometimes we think about these social issues that we refer to in umbrella terms. But take, for example, the issue of justice. We look at it as one very broad umbrella term. But as you were talking about the work you've been engaged in, you talked about food justice. And you see, that's an umbrella term cascading down to a very particular issue, and those principles of justice then applying to that. Diana and I have often talked about electoral justice, so that's why it was able to ring out for me when you talk about food justice. What is food justice, for example, and how does the principles of justice apply to such a specific social issue?
Yeah, I think if I'm thinking about it from a disparity perspective and where the issue and the problem exists, is that historically, I would say urban centers, which are predominantly, people of color that exist there, have had less opportunities for resources and less investment. So in these communities, there is an over-proliferation of fast food restaurants, takeout, things that really don't have a lot of nutritious value, usually cheaper, more caloric, and accessible. And if you were to just desire to have some produce, some fruits and vegetables for you and your family, you would have to travel a great distance to get to it. If you didn't have personal transportation or a vehicle, then you have to, ride public transportation, and now you're carrying back groceries for your family. If you were fortunate enough to get a ride share, that's an additional expense. And it was often outside of your neighborhood. And I talked a little bit about this at the Art of Dialogue, where we, in our research, looking at the data, got to see that areas that don't have healthy food access, that have poor people, have higher episodes of diet-related disease and death. We took all the data and layered it on top of each other, and it was a very clear map. Side note, we took an existing map of a practice called redlining, which is a federal agency, the Federal Housing Association, gave designations and classifications to neighborhoods all across the country. And if you were a neighborhood that had Black people, you literally had a red line drawn around that neighborhood, so that loans, investments just weren't able to happen in those communities. And if you had just some Black people, you had a more favorable rating. If you had no Black people, you had an even better rating. And because of this, there have been lack of investments in these neighborhoods. And then there have been even some policies that have been put in place, like the Small Business Association that was established in the 1970s in the US, was meant to allow, because there was like the Black Pride movement and calls for self-sufficiency, we saw that there was government investment in this cause, and they were making available grants and loans for Black entrepreneurs. The condition was that it could only be for a franchise, and the franchise being a fast food restaurant, and that it can only open in urban areas. So if you wanted to open a health food store using those public dollars, you weren't allowed to. If you wanted to open it in a neighborhood that didn't already have an oversaturation of unhealthy food, you couldn't do it. So when you see these poor health outcomes and people don't have access to food, that is the injustice that we're talking about, artificially created, and that we have to really be intentional in helping people, again, get what they need so that they can survive and be healthy. And I'll just add just one more thing. We have like this health impact pyramid that looks at the very top of the pyramid, the things that you can see. And it's like, yeah, we want people to make better choices. And like, yeah, we all have personal responsibility and we should do that. But it's not as impactful as us incentivizing by adding healthy food in communities and providing education around how to cook healthy and to even subsidize like healthier items, because produce is actually as much cheaper to get a cherry soda than to get actual cherries. And you can get apple drink, not juice, but some sugary drink instead of a real apple. So these policies have been created that have led to these conditions. And, justice is us really moving to correct those past problems and create a better, future and opportunity for people.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yep.
And it would be very clear, it's very clear that there's a war being waged and propagated through policy manipulation.
sure.
Yep.
And I think what we've noticed in Kenya in our political context is that increasingly people are awakening to looking into some of the policies that are being advanced by national government and especially by parliament, which was part of our protest last year, unpacking some of the legislation and bills coming through parliament.
I just want to add to that. So even when I mentioned like the Small Business Association having these funds for minority businesses, you can argue that was a good policy, that it was intended to provide an opportunity for Black people in the country, but the unintended consequences. It's like they put a policy forward with good intention, but it was the way that they created it was creating additional problems in it as well.
So it's systemic.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that issue of policy manipulation and how certain things are being engineered and targeted at certain communities that may not be in favor with those people in power is something that also came out in conversation with George when you were sharing with us how even at the biggest, you call yourself the biggest law firm in Philadelphia.
We're the biggest criminal defense
law
firm
firm
in the state.
Yeah.
In the state.
And you were saying that increasingly you're even rethinking whether you will confine yourself to criminal defense because of some of the things you're seeing in immigration.
Right.
And those are policy issues which seem to be targeting minorities.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So what can we say about policy manipulation in that respect?
So, I think one of the things that we're trying to do is we are working actively to expand immigration defense in our office, like to actually take on the immigration issues. Currently, we can represent people who are immigrants who have been convicted of crimes, because that is our charge. We're trying to expand into the immigration defense area, and we do have the support of other immigration organizations in the city of Philadelphia who also want us to do this work because of the work we do in the criminal legal space. But again, there are some, without going into too much detail, there are some political headwinds that we are running into from certain folks that don't want us to be funded to do that, to get into that immigration space, because there is right now in the U.S., all over the country, there is this emphasis on, we've got to get them out of here.
Yeah.
And I think folks know at our level, exactly. And I think folks know at our level that if we get involved, we're going to move the needle a little bit more in favor of protecting everybody who comes here, because it's our philosophy that everybody who comes here has certain rights once you're here, especially since even most undocumented people here are working. Many, if not most, I don't have all the stats, I'm not an immigration expert, but many, if not most, are paying taxes.
Yeah.
They pay utilities. I mean, they contribute to their local economies. They just happen to be undocumented. And now, so what you have is organizations like ours. It's like we want to get into this space, but we have certain policymakers who have been who used to take our calls, who suddenly can't be reached because of the fear, and we can talk about that later, but the fear of reprisal from the current administration. But it trickles all the way down to our level at the local level.
Yeah, I think what's coming to mind as I'm hearing about the policy manipulation and how sometimes a policy can look great, but then when you look into the fine details, you see, no, these are so many other issues. I'm hearing this because from our perspective back here at home in Kenya, we see the West, and let me also say the United States, as this mature democracy where things work, that when you lobby for a certain policy, you know, it goes through certain institutions, like there's some trust that institutions actually work. But when I hear also that also there's some systemic issues, it seems that I'm wondering how in your communities, because now you've seen this, like especially the red, what did you call it?
Redlining.
The red lining. In your communities and in your own different work, how have you helped your communities to maybe be vigilant that some of these things that come in, they may look shiny, but really they're just shiny, let me say, handcuffs.
Yeah. So, you know, when you had talked about like what you made the note about us not being politicians. And I would say Philadelphia is a big city. It's, you know, the 5th or 6th largest, but it's also like a very networked place. So people know each other and they're very much like connected to each other. It's not very hard to connect to another person in that regards. So as we're thinking about like, you know, policies and, you know, how they have. Okay, tell me your question one more time.
My question was like, how are you helping people? Like you're in the policy space. How are you
so,
helping them see?
As we're thinking about policies, like my work, instead of being a political person, is behind the scenes. And, you know, I try to provide a historical context for any issue that you're facing. And there's probably going to be an underlying issue related to race there as well. So, you know, we lean into that in terms of the education. That's the foundation. First, you have to have understanding of the issues, and then you move into hopefully some empathy for how people have been impacted, and then we can move into action and actually designing goals, et cetera. So our job is, you know, working with foundations who fund and support a lot of work in the social sector and these organizations that are leading that work to help them understand the issues better, and then to help them strategize around it, to set proper goals that do address those disparities.
Those issues,
and help them set the strategy. So it's not about us being in front, it's about helping them and elevating them.
I like that. You know, when you see here, like during I don't know if you knew about the Gen Z protests that happened in last year. And everyone at some point was trying to own being a leader of this protest, you know. And like I hear what you're saying is that, you know what, we're at the background, you guys do it, we're happy to help. And I'm just wondering, how can we help more people in our communities have that kind of mindset that it's really not about me, it's really just what I can do, but then really if someone else can do it better or a grander scale, go ahead and do it.
Oh, goodness.
For me, for our organization, we often and again, I'm use the immigration thing because that's kind of one of the bigger
issues,
touch points right now in the States. And for our organization, we work very closely with a lot of immigration defense and advocacy organizations playing a very similar role. Like we can't necessarily be out in front, you know, on immigration policy because again, that's not our wheelhouse, as it were. But what we do is we do provide kind of silent support. We do collaborate with them when they, for example, maybe helping them, you know, craft the legalities if they want to draft legislation and things of that nature. We help them out in that way. But I would say in terms of helping communities, I think we've got, even stepping back from our roles, Dwayne and our roles and what we do, we've got a lot of work to do as groups and as community leaders to start educating people about not just what's going on now, but really the foundational elements of government and why, you know, why you should know about this stuff in the first place. It's very easy to accept, for example, that the CEO of an electric car company is qualified to eliminate government inefficiencies without having any experience in the government. but we accept that because most people don't know the intricacies of government or even what it does. If you ask some people or in some states or some communities, say, well, the federal government doesn't do anything for us, as they get in their car and they drive on a paved road and stop at a stoplight and, and all of this stuff that's going on that's federally government funded, but yet they say the federal government, and because they don't know. So we've got to kind of start from there, and it becomes difficult. And then I'll turn it over to Dwayne, but one of the things, because it's a lot to unpack and I don't want to get into too much, but one of the things is I think our media environment right now, particularly social media, is so segmented. And I'm guilty of it too, is that we kind of follow our own channels. We have our feeds, right?
Oh, yeah, that's
and
true.
so we get the information that we want to know, right?
It's curated for us.
Yeah, it's curated for us. So, the average person can tell you every detail, complex sort of detail of some salacious celebrity scandal. They know names, dates, places, and when it happened and who did what. But then when you ask them about, the big bad bill that just got passed, nobody knows what's in it. And part of that reason is because we get so much information from social media, and because social media is so channeled to our individual tastes and likes, and it becomes that echo chamber. Not only aren't we informed, but we become more reticent to outside opinions.
Yeah.
The other piece to that, you're talking about this erosion of our knowledge around basic civics, and that's not by accident. They have removed it from schools.
Was it in schools before?
Yeah, more.
Certainly in our parents' generation, because it was seen as everyone's responsibility to be a part of a civil society.
Yeah.
And I think, even the way that our elections are designed through an electoral college, outside of, popular vote, there is perhaps a innate distrust of the American people almost, and decisions are often made for others. And I think it has worked when it was the North Star was this idea of a better America, and around these principles of democracy that we all could believe in. Right now, there's an erosion away from those values, and instead it's become tribal along political and geographic lines. But the North Star that people are following is like one man's ideology and vision for the country and even for the world. That is so dangerous, where our court systems and our Congress have literally ceded power to someone who, I'm going to say, is a convicted criminal. And that we believe that that person has the moral authority to lead what we call the most powerful nation on earth. I mean, it is baffling. So how to convince people to not be in the front is really difficult when we see someone who's in the front that doesn't have the interests of the people at mind. So people are trying to position themselves maybe out of a means of survival, perhaps, and benefit, because somehow we've lost our way as a collective, and we have to get that back. Again, it happens through honest conversation. And again, when you are legislating away the ability to know your history and to have conversations that are not political, but it's just a matter, like some things are not political, like some things are just moral. How you treat people and how and I won't even get into the ideology that is tied to religion. I mean, but we have these values that we say, but we just don't live them out. So what we're trying to do is just help people understand, like, what is the status quo? What does harm look like? How do we move to a different place where everyone can have voice? And that is hard because people don't want to give up power for some reason.
I think I just want to take you back to something that you said, just help our audience better understand what you're saying. Because the same kind of erosion that the States is experiencing, I would say is the same kind of erosion, or rather that African states, Kenya and other countries seem to be experiencing. I would say if I would look at Africa, or rather many countries, you could see that there's a move more from democracy into authoritarian. But it doesn't happen overnight. You know, there's some small things that happen. And maybe I want you to just share with us a bit more about the museums, because that's a history.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm going to pass that to my man, George J., who has lived in the great capital of the country.
Right. So, yeah, in Washington, D.C., where, you know, a lot of these, and not just D.C., because, you know, displays and public displays that are federally funded around the country, you know, have been subject to this audit.
This is something that's evolving right now.
From the Trump administration. And in this audit, what they are looking for is what they consider to be problematic language in the view of President Trump. Not the president, not the office of the president, not the White House, President Trump. So certain language in certain displays that maybe talk about too negatively about the institution of chattel slavery in the United States. For example, they want that removed or reworded. They want it reworded. So one of the
have
things,
like workers from Africa.
right? Yeah, exactly.
Instead of slaves.
Correct.
Right.
This is crazy.
Right. And
No,
so
expatriates.
this is the kind of thing, or not to talk too much about the institution of slavery in terms of how it impacts race relations today, for example.
Yep.
To kind of gloss over this stuff a little bit more and paint a rosier picture of the history of the United States of America. It's fine to have if that's your perspective and that's what you want to believe, that's fine. But facts are facts and history is history. And what they're trying to do is say, but if we can erase that, if we can take that out. So to your earlier question about what can communities do, I know in Philadelphia, for example, there's an attorney, Michael Court, who has been having demonstrations at these monuments, making sure people take pictures, making sure people copy the transcriptions so that we never forget that kind of history. And these are granular things. And I'll give you another example from my organization, which is our Junior Defender program. That program is run by Guy Lang, and he's working in schools with school-age children in the junior high and high school levels at our schools, teaching them about the criminal legal system and the pitfalls of it and how to avoid it, but also teaching them about the principles of advocacy, informing yourself, organization, and then mobilization around issues, and having them do projects where they identify a problem, how they're going to approach the problem, how they're going to organize and mobilize and propose solutions at their individual schools. And these are very granular things. These are very isolated, points of activism, but it's about rewiring that mindset that says things are bad, but unless I'm in office, there's nothing I can do about it. No, there's something you can do about it in your own community. And I think part two of that, and probably the harder part tactically, is now how do we amplify this and get people talking about these kinds of efforts so that maybe somebody in another community in the Midwest, in Iowa, or in Nebraska says, oh, I can do that in my school or in my city.
Yeah.
I want to come in from stage left with a question and an observation. I've thought about this episode as distant relatives.
Yeah.
We have our distant relatives from across the pond. And I reference that because that's also the name of an album I really used to enjoy listening to. And I've talked about it before by one of your artists, Nas and Damian Marley. And there's a song in there where it talks about Africa must wake up. And it says, Africa must wake up, the sleeping sons of Jacob. Yesterday we were kings. Can you tell the young ones, who are we today? AI. We've talked about losing our way as a collective. We've talked about the erosion of history and essentially the erosion of identity. You've talked about social media curating messages for us to our individual preferences, and mostly towards leisure, desire, and
Entertainment.
things that really don't speak to the substance of humanity. And what I'm getting from both your experiences, in fact, speaking to that curating, there's a friend of ours who we work with also in the media and marketing space, and he talks about the difference between what has emerged from the information age is that we used to live in the broadcast age, where everybody used to get their information from
Everybody
one
got
source.
everything.
And now we're living in the addressable age, what he calls the addressable age, where it's individualized to your taste and to your preferences, and to the algorithms give you what you want to see. In that way, you become less informed. And, you know, scripture says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. It becomes apparent that it's all the more important to create platforms outside of the Internet of Things, where people can come together to convene, to ensure that the collective doesn't lose way, to ensure that, you know, platforms like, and I think that's what Art of Dialogue was as well. I think that's what we're trying to do with democratizing, you know, our views on politics. How do we ensure that we are creating platforms where, through the work that we do in our respective sectors and outside of our work in our communities, we're having platforms where all these issues can be tabled, to make sure that even if you were going down on your Twitter feed to your preferences, I can still ensure that on this particular platform, I point out to you that, hey, there's this big bad bill that we need to discuss and see how to advance. So, and getting the sense that that is part of what the inspiration for Just Strategies is. So how can we become more deliberate about creating these platforms, both in our communities and as well in our respective sectors? Because you're clearly working together very closely, despite that common history, and yet you are in separate, different fields, but you have those commonalities. And it seems that part of what is making it possible is these platforms that you create in various ways.
2025 is very different than, say, 1965. So, you know, we saw like a civil rights movement happen that was largely organized by, you know, our student nonviolent coordinating committee. It was, you know, MLK as a figurehead, but Abernathy and lots of other people in support of that, the NAACP, the Urban League. You had these large institutions that were providing leadership in these spaces. As you said, you know, the internet has given everyone the power to potentially not only, you know, absorb it individually, but also to position themselves as leaders. It's the lack of responsibility around that. And I get, you know, I'm going to say like mental health is a real thing that we all should be protecting and trying to enrich. So we need distractions. Like those things are good because reality can be tough. But when there's an imbalance in, you know, what we're consuming and what we care about, that's when it's really problematic. Because lots of people get upset when they see George Floyd, you know, being murdered. But, you know, to sustain that effort makes it really challenging. So I'm not sure if there is a central figure or a central entity that can take up, you know, the mantle and lead the change that's needed. I do know that, you know, I'm going to speak in really almost black and white terms, like, you know, the ops, as folks like to say, have been organizing for a very long time. And they have a plan. You know, this in the US, there's an effort, this Project 2025, which was talked about prior to the election as like a blueprint that's going to like dismantle the country as we know it. And it was like, I have nothing to do with it. I don't know anything about it. And yet we are seeing step by step the dismantling of the US as we know it. You know, from the dismantling of the court system to the policing, the military state that's now happening in our cities. So none of that is by accident. So on our end, if you are trying to organize around a more just vision for the world, what does that platform look like? What are the, you know, larger, you know, what's our North Star? And it has to be inclusive. It has to be a big tent. And I think that's what happens in US politics. Like, you know, when you build the big tent, we haven't done a good enough job in seeing our interconnection with each other. So that's really necessary. But we have to have that North Star, whatever those values are that drive us all. And then we have to enact strategies that are happening, at the federal and state and local. And I'm going to say on the global level, because it's not just happening in the US, it's happening here, it's happening in lots of countries. And I think they're sharing playbooks with each other. We have to do the same.
Yep.
And I think, going to the Big Tent thing, I think this is the strength and pitfall of the Big Tent is that in a political context, I believe there becomes a lot of fighting for, whose priority is going to win. And we've got to come to a thing where we agree, regardless of what your identity or affiliation is, or, I'm a representative of the LGBTQ community and we need this, or, I'm from the African American community, we need this and we need that. All of that is true. Now we can all have our personal opinions on what the priorities. My personal opinion is that whatever you improve conditions for Black people, you will improve it for everyone.
And I'm going to add the Black women specifically as well.
No, I agree. And I think, but putting that aside, what are your North Stars? Let's just call it, for political party's sake, right? For simplicity's sake, if you're in the Democratic Party, what are your priorities? What are your overarching priorities? Forget the individual priorities of the thing. We have to come to an agreement that this is what we're going to advance, because that's the old adage in the States is Democrats fall in love, Republicans fall in line. And that's what we're seeing. They will fall in line. They see the priorities and they're like, yep, that's what we're going for. And for years, they've had wins and they had losses, a lot of losses, but they never, ever deviated from what their priorities were. They may have been quiet about some things, right? They may have, so for 50 years or so, they were quieter about abortion. Yes, you had pro-life groups and things like that were, for example, fighting against the Roe v. Wade decision. They fought against Roe v. Wade for decades, which is the federal decision that made abortion legal in the United States. And it was overturned recently. 50 years. Man, that's dedication, right? If nothing else, they really stuck to it. And I think we have to understand that, because, and especially now in the social media age, because we see everything in sound bites and reels, and we think, oh, this stuff happened, even the Black Lives Matter movie. Yes, that was a flashpoint, and yes, a lot of that came, but that was 2020, right? That was 5 years ago. To be honest, a lot of those gains were starting to be pulled back by 2023, 2024, before Trump
for sure.
So again, but that's fine, because there's always an ebb and flow. And I think, for young people and people in the younger generations, I think what we can do as us Gen Zers and even older folks is kind of in part to remind them this stuff takes years. You may be my age before you see the world you want to see, until we get to that level of patience and stop looking for the one viral post that changes everything, right? Instead of looking for that George Floyd moment that sparks a revolution. If it happens, fantastic, but we can't rely on that.
I think now, speaking about that, I love what you said, in that having the patience and also having the realization that the change that you're agitating for, you may not see it until maybe later on, or maybe you may not see it, but at least you are part of the agitation. Now I want to talk a little bit about police brutality, because there are some similarities or some comparative analysis that we could dive into in terms of Kenyan context and what's happening in the States, especially around the Black community. Now you spoke about George Floyd, and in Kenya, we had most recently, we've had a lot of police brutality deaths. In the last 5 years, from COVID time and even before. But I want to talk about the most recent one that sparked a national conversation. It was a young man, I don't know if you heard about it. It was a young man called Albert Ojwang. Albert was more seen as he was a teacher, but also very vocal on social media. And such people now are termed bloggers, social media bloggers. And I think he put up a post that was inflammatory towards the Deputy Inspector General of the National Police. And next thing, he was arrested all the way from he had gone to visit his parents, all the way from his parents' place, which is like maybe a 6 hours drive out of Nairobi in a different local government, brought to Nairobi, booked, and by the end of that night ended up dead.
Wow.
So questions were like, okay, how did he die in police custody?
Yeah.
When the police came up, they spoke about it and they said, he hit his head in the wall. But when the postmortem came, they were like, no, this is blunt force trauma. There was no way he wouldn't. Yeah, he wouldn't. Yeah,
Freddie
you
Gray in
can.
Baltimore, the same.
And there was a
same
lot
thing.
of outrage and protests. There was protests back in where the local community that he comes from. Here locally, there was a push to have the Deputy Inspector General removed from office and call for accountability. And somehow, somewhere over the weeks and months, it just seemed that, yes, we are pushing for this accountability. It looks like we're almost getting there, but then there's nothing.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think about it now from the Black community in the United States that faces a lot of police brutality. And I'm sure apart even from the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm sure even before that, there was already police brutality and a lot of young men dying because of police brutality or getting murdered.
Throughout the history of the country.
Yeah. So, but how is it that, from what you're talking about, the patience, and for us, we're like, we want to see this now. So how do we continue calling for accountability against police brutality to ensure that we have a more just society? Because the police is supposed to protect and serve all of us. It doesn't matter how you look, what color you are. It doesn't matter who you call God. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So we have a police accountability unit at the Defender Association, run by two really good attorneys. And they do a lot of work on these kind of issues, how people are policed. Now, it's client-centered, right? Because a lot of the reason that we do this work is because many times we have to go on the stand, we have to call police officers to the stand when our clients are arrested and put on trial. So that's kind of where it came from. So, this group had done a lot of work in terms of getting, official information requests and things like that. And we get a lot of data to show the various disparities, including people who are pulled over in vehicular stops and things like that. In fact, if you put it on your on a link somewhere, I can give you the link to the police. We have a dashboard that diagrams who's getting stopped by the police, where they're getting stopped by race. Yeah, it's a really good dashboard. But I will say this. I think there's a culture in policing in this country that in our country, maybe this country too, but there's a culture of policing that there's a saying that culture eats policy for breakfast, right? You can hand down all of the policy you want and reform policies you want, but there is a culture in policing, and there is an esprit de corps amongst police officers that is historic. I mean, many police officers are like, fourth, fifth generation police officers. It's almost like they view it as an ethnic group. Like they can be that unified. Police officers who maybe call out another police officer for wrongdoing are ostracized. Yep. That officer, if he or she needs backup to deal with a situation, that backup can be slow to come, right? Like they can be vindictive among each other. So again, until we start to address that culture, and I'm not a policing expert, I don't know how to do it, but that's what's been pervasive. I think that all we can do is keep fighting to make sure that these policies start to take hold. And I think, by the work that we're doing around kind of showing the actual numbers, like this is what's actually happening, y'all. I think that's all we can do.
I just want to note that we're in a tricky place right now because you're referencing like ensuring that the policies hold, but we're seeing a reversal of those policies as well. Yeah. So there have been orders, for example, for the federal Department of Justice to take over police forces and to have a heightened level of accountability in certain communities because they have proven to be bad actors as it relates to harm to people that they're supposed to be serving. And those orders are now being rescinded, which is, of great concern. So yes, we need, the policies to be followed, but we need to protect the existing policies, to be honest.
True.
And there's a double down. And don't forget what the Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
Well, that's the other piece. And we've seen the further regression of this issue is, again, we're talking about the activation of our, military to police our communities. And we all know that over-policing and specifically the targeting of, communities of color lead to, increased contact, which is a danger to particularly, Black people. So, we're moving in the wrong direction. We're in a bit of a constitutional crisis. I don't know, in terms of martial law and the allowance of having military on the streets, but it's not normal and it's being normalized. It's like moving, during COVID and some racial reckoning, there was placements of these units in cities strategically and then pulled back because it's a 30-day stay. You can't remain past that. Yeah. Now we're seeing that some artificial justification for policing in Washington, D.C., not based on data, not based on where the need is, but based on some ideology and the promise of increasing these presences in other cities, all which happen to be led by Democratic mayors.
And particularly in electoral swing states.
In electoral swings that are considered Democratic states as well.
That are considered important states for any candidate that wants to win a national election, right?
Yeah, so there are larger things at play.
So these are more political solutions than it is, it's political strategies all through and through.
It certainly has to be a part of it.
But I think...
And concentration of power.
Yeah.
Right, but I think even up with the political solution, I think that's where it gets back. It's all connected, right? Because, we can't... This pendulum that you go back and forth every 4 years, knock on wood, it's only 4 years of this. That's not sustainable either, right? I think, and that's the bigger question is, how do we educate and train society as a whole to understand what real acceptable values are, not American values, but just human values,
That's right.
So that any candidate might be a little more conservative on some things economically or even socially.
Which has always happened.
Still, there's still that North Star that Dwayne referenced, like who are we as people? But we've got to break through the segmentation. We have to break through the noise and, quite frankly, the distraction and the otherism, right? It's easy when you don't feel things are going well for yourself. And if somebody tells you the reason is because of that Black one or that brown one or that woman or that trans person, and let me tell you, speaking of the trans thing, that was a huge factor in handing Donald Trump the election. People were really moved by these commercials that an outside group ran saying that Kamala Harris is for they, them, Donald Trump is for you. That really, and so it's a
illegal immigrant trans
it's a
person.
Very simplistic knee-jerk thing, but it's very effective if you're trained to get all of your information from 30-second sound bites. Right?
And moving away also even from that idea of identifying what the candidate leans towards, I think part of the conversation increasingly is shifting towards every person being a candidate because every person has a responsibility. So beyond that individual who's going to come into office, part of what we're saying is how do we get more involved as individuals? What you've said excellently in terms of not just values for a country, but the values for society, for all people across the world, so that we can hold each other accountable. Right. And part of what is emerging is that there are so many issues that do require vigilance. The other day during the panel, Madam Speaker, Diana said that eternal vigilance is the price
Is the
of freedom.
cost, yeah.
And so on all these issues, there's a requirement to be vigilant. However, we're not omniscient, omnipresent, can't be all-knowing and everywhere at the same time. So it would appear to me, listening to both of you, that all the more reason we need situations where people from various sectors, for instance, where you were talking about police brutality, and you said you're not an expert on policing, but you have views on it. But there is somebody who's an expert on policing or who has been involved in those issues, who can come to a common platform where now you having your experience in in unions and communication for public defense, public health, all these platforms can now coalesce these views. And I suppose what is emerging is that because some of the people who are advancing agendas that are leading to the degradation of society are so consistent and so organized, part of what I'm hearing from both of you is that those who believe in the goodness of society and the advancement of humanity also need to be just as organized, and need to increasingly start thinking about how do we organize to address this issues. Discipline, consistency, over that patience you were talking about, over not just a few weeks, a few months, but over decades. Being persistent until that we shift the mold, break the mold, or establish an entirely new one. Because one of the views I've had for some time, and you were alluding to it a little bit, is we take the idea of a nation state, the idea of a country for granted. We take the idea of these institutions we have for granted, as if, God created the heavens and the earth, and the following day there were countries, and they had institutions and governments. Well, they're all man-made, and because they're man-made, they can be destroyed just as easily. So how do we organize in a way that we don't take them for granted, and we can have fortified structures that ensure that we have a tomorrow that we can see that speaks to all of our interests.
And maybe just to add on that, I think we also need to be vigilant, especially us in Africa, because a lot of what is happening in the West, United States, a lot of what is happening in the West is also connected to what is happening in Africa. So if we don't know about all this regression that's happening in the States, and not seeing also how it's connected to what's happening in Kenya and around the African states, then we start creating solutions that are so siloed, the thing for the algorithm and the social media. So we're all just seeing things in such a siloed ways and not realizing that the strategy is the connection, the collaboration, ensuring that I understand, when I hear when Trump came into office, let me tell you guys something. I don't know if you knew.
No.
We didn't, when I say we, I'm talking about some of the sentiments that were coming during when Kenyans were following the US elections. A lot of them were actually pro-Trump. But not because of they like Trump. It was because of our president, because it seemed that our current president seemed to be too much of a darling to the Biden administration. So they were like, but when Trump comes, this is the thinking. And a lot of people were saying this on social media, that, when Trump comes, man, this guy has no ally in the White House.
Relationships will be severed.
When he did,
who knew?
We ended up getting impacted with now also the funding cuts. And at that time, people were not connecting the dots that, hey, when you get such a person or you promote such a person to power.
You call that buyer's remorse.
Buyer's remorse is happening in the States right now. Greatly.
There's a lot. There's a lot of that going on,
and also cognitive dissonance. Like although clearly things aren't going your way, you still justify it and excuse it away. Very
but now just also hearing that some of the things that have happened once President Trump came in, and a lot of the policies and the different things, let me just call it the organized chaos that's happening.
Daily.
It seems so much removed from me, but when I speak more to you guys, I see how also it's connected. And I start to learn that, hey, we need to remain vigilant. That when I learn, when I see something, you know, on my social media, sometimes I see something about America, I'm like, And now I'm learning, you know, I'm learning that no, the more I get to know about what's happening on a different side of the continent, it's also, it helps us connect the problems, because the problem I feel I don't know what you guys think. What we're seeing going around the globe seems like an erosion of values and human values. Yeah. We can't be sitting here and kids are dying in Gaza, you know, and it's basic human values. And it seems that we've all forgotten to be human, and now we're all about who we support politically. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm so grateful for this conversation, because you're opening our eyes away from our local community. We start to see the world as the world, not just the one around us, but the one we can't see or we can't travel to. And we hope that we are also shedding a bit more, bit more light to you guys.
Human rights and human values, good principles and virtues are borderless. Yeah. And that's why MLK said that a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I think, Madam Speaker, we may have at this rate to go and shoot an episode in the city of brotherly love.
Yes.
You are more than welcome. We would love to host you.
The exchange program continues.
Yeah, we would love to host you.
I think with that, it's we can ask our guests to bless us with parting shots. There's so much to... We can keep talking for hours.
Yes, true.
But bless us with some insights that our audience can ruminate on as we wait for when we get our visas to the States. Hopefully we get them. Good
luck. or if we get visas to return.
Yeah, I'm a little nervous.
Who knows?
Try not to drop this before next Thursday.
Yeah, to that point, you know, George's joke about next Thursday. So we're headed to Mombasa, having an amazing time here again in Nairobi. And Monday we'll go to Mombasa, and then we'll return to the States on Thursday. But in the back of even U.S. citizens' minds is like, well, what's going to happen once I get to customs and border? You know, like even though you have your passport and you're a citizen,
for the first time in
the
history,
back of your mind, there's like an armed guard that's standing there as you're coming through customs. Yeah. That's never been the case.
You never thought about
So what we're sharing today with you is, it may seem heavy. It may seem as if we are ultra critical of the United States and its leadership. And I'm just going to say that, you know, we are the descendants of African slaves who have built the United States. On the backs of African labor exists the United States, and also Chinese immigrants, and also folks who are coming across the border, and even Europeans who came over in pursuit of another dream. So I am more tied to those people and those values, and like that's what I'm trying to honor. Because of their sacrifices, I am here, and I have every right to be critical of the country, because it is not living up to their sacrifices and to the values that we said. So we appreciate you having us and giving us this forum to share with you. And also, again, we've been learning about what's happening in Kenya in the context. And, you know, that's heightening our awareness as well, because we are cousins, because we are inextricably tied to each other. What is happening here is affecting what's happening there, and vice versa. So, you know, we have a common struggle. And for me, like, that's a beautiful thing. Yeah. And that's the biggest thing that I'm taking away from my time here.
Absolutely.
Wow. Yeah.
Let me see. It's parting shots. So there's a couple of things to echo what Dwayne said. What he ended with. I definitely want to thank both of you for having us here today to talk, and Chaka for taking us out for some amazing food this week. But also just for the opportunity to visit and how well I've been treated, particularly by the Nairobi healthcare system. They do a fantastic job.
Please.
We can talk about that behind the scenes. We don't get into any details about that, but excellent healthcare.
Oh, really?
I have no complaints. I have no notes.
Just to say that, like, you know, there's a perception about how the U.S. has it all figured out.
Not at all.
I mean, yes, in lots of ways,
Yes.
but like, again, the care that you received and the attention you received,
Quickly.
far beyond what we would have experienced in the States.
Oh,
Yes.
Just going to say
Yeah,
that.
I was gonna say that.
And
It
greatly
was-
appreciative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we may need
No,
to have a
I-
part two.
Yeah,
Not that everything is right
yeah, I'm,
there,
I'm sure it's not. I'm
but-
sure it's not perfect, but I know it's not. But definitely, shout out to the healthcare system. But what I would say is just kind of just two things, just to be brief. One is I think don't settle for what's coming through your feed. Don't just settle for what's coming through your feed. Yes, distraction is good. I am a big believer in distractions from time to time. We all indulge in it, but be curious and try to listen to the other side, even if you think you disagree or you don't want to hear what that person has to say. Try to listen, because I think foundationally, if we're going to get to a better society as a globe, we're going to have to learn to at least listen to each other and be sincere in our arguments and not be motivated by, why my point of view is just a direct benefit to me, but why it's good for the whole country to think the way I think, right? And I have no political solutions, but the other thing I'll say is that, once you reach a certain age, you should always carry yourself as a leader, whether you want to run for office or not. And what I mean by that is, when you're seen in the world, how do you want to be perceived? What do you want people thinking about you? And I think because I actually, when I leave the house and when I go to work, I keep that in the back of my mind. If a child is watching me, what do I want them to see? If my community's watching me, what do I want them to see? And just kind of that exercise, I think, makes us all a little bit more thoughtful, a little about what we do, about the choices we make, and about how we talk to people, because a lot of it has to do with that.
How we talk
and that's how I think just learning, taking small steps towards being a better human and being a leader, at least in your own mind.
Wow. Very edifying. Madam Speaker, take it home for us.
There you have it, from Politically Connected. We've taken you across the sea, all the way to Philadelphia and the United States, and just seeing how some of the issues we're facing and some of the issues they're facing are similar. However, one thing that we've said really that's come very clear in this podcast, number one, I would say, is the need for collaboration, and also the need of vigilance. We've said that policy. No, what did he say? Culture eats policy
for breakfast.
For breakfast. So if this episode enlightened you in one way or the other, if this episode inspired you, or if this episode left you with a few more questions, drop it in the comment box. We'll make sure Dwayne or George gets to see it and even respond to you. But we hope you enjoy it. Make sure you subscribe, and see you in the next episode.